Here's part 2 of Tiff Phillips' conversation with community advocate Lisa Drennan on our Open Here podcast.
So how does inclusion benefit not just people with varied disabilities, but also the community as a whole? How do we all benefit from it?
Yeah, and I often, in part of my training, so what I will do is we'll break down the benefits for the individual, for the organization seeking to be more inclusive, and then for the community as a whole. And I think for the individual, I mean, to me, it's so simple, right? You would think of that they are participating in something they love, they're valued, right? They maybe have an opportunity to learn a new skill. They feel like they belong, right? So that's a benefit for them. And perhaps even the opportunity for a job where they are earning their own money, right? And then I think for an organization, there's so many benefits, and I could go on and on.
Right.
But I think one of the misunderstandings about inclusion, and usually it comes up as a hurdle right away. Oh, it's so expensive. We can't afford to do inclusion. And actually, there's more financial benefits to an organization that commits to being more inclusive. Really? Just think about it. You open up let's say 1 in 5 people have or will have a disability at some point in their lives, right? That's a big chunk of our community, right? And it's the largest minority group in the world, right? So if we open up and welcome in this community, you're increasing your clientele, right? I know myself, I will shop at a store or patronize an organization or business that intentionally hires folks with diverse abilities. So there's those benefits. But then you also think that inclusive strategies, so if I work, say, with the YMCA and I'm teaching them, here are inclusive strategies, but here's the kicker. We use these for everyone, because they benefit everyone. Having an inclusive mindset of helping someone to be successful at whatever you're offering, a swim class, right? Being part of a yoga or joining a tennis league, then those strategies are going to help everyone, whether someone has a diagnosis or not. It doesn't matter. It's going to be beneficial for everyone. And typical peers, right, or neurotypical peers or non-disabled peers, they can be a great role model, right, for someone learning, oh, my first day in camp, what's this like, right? How do I interact? So there's win-wins there. But for our community as a whole, I think when we all think about being more inclusive, we open up more spaces and places. Right. And, from churches to libraries to clubs that you belong in, scouts, any part of our community that makes that intentional decision to be more inclusive in its practices, it's a win-win for everybody. And it breaks down those barriers of like, oh, those people, don't they have their special staff who work with those special people, which is not something that isn't a very positive way to look at folks with disabilities.
So what are some small steps that we can take as individuals to become a more inclusive community?
Yeah, I think, there's so many things that we can do, but right out of the bat, I think the first thing is inform yourself, right? Yeah. Education. Start with learning disability etiquette, proper terminology, right? Maybe follow social media platforms or podcasts or read books about disability to learn, especially learning from folks with disabilities, right? So there's a term, nothing about us without us. So I think that's the first thing that we want to do, is just inform yourself. Maybe do an assessment for where your organization, your business, your group, your club is at, and say, can we be doing better? Wow, I'm looking around, and of all of our employees, there's no one that appears to have or is identified as having a disability. Can we do better? Are we hiring a diverse workforce? And if not, what can we do to start that? So start with training and education, and that goes from the top all the way down to the bottom, right? From your CEO or executive director, right, all the way down to the boots on the ground who peers sitting next to someone with a disability. I think that's important, and connecting with someone. Say hello. Look past, I always call it like pull back the curtain, right? When we see someone who it's apparent that they have a disability or you're aware that they have a disability, that's all we tend to focus on.
Right.
And then we're very deficit focused. And what I try to teach, let's be strength focused. And we have to first get to know the person. Start by saying hello, right? And then asking questions as you would anyone else. Oh, I love your hat. Oh, you're really into, this sports team. Or, oh, I notice you're very fashionable. Do you like shopping, right? Or anything. I see you're reading this book, or you're interested in horseback riding, right? So, oh, tell me more. And then you get to know a person. And I think that's really important, just to connect with somebody. And then I think, okay, now you've learned, you're educated, and you're connecting, but then act, right? Do something that's going to help propel more inclusive communities. And that could be, you know what, in my work setting, we're going to hire someone to come in and do an inclusion training, okay? And I know there's a huge DEI movement, diversity, equity, inclusion. Typically, the focus is on other dimensions of diversity and leaves out the largest minority group in the world, disability. So make sure you're not leaving that out, because if your DEI initiative does not include disability, it's exclusive. Right. So there's that, and be an ally. And by being an ally, I always like to kind of state this. An ally is not something you are, it's something you do. Right? Advocate for, connect with, speak up for, ensure that we are, welcoming, and then we're supporting folks with disabilities to be part of any entity within our community.
That's really great advice. I think a lot of people tend to be really nervous around folks with disabilities, but you have to remember, we're all human, just going through the same stuff.
Right. And I think it's how our, history and how our society has set things up, right? Before, and in my lifetime, people were institutionalized with a disability. And I think that there's just this, perception, so some would call it, there's like a social model, a medical model, and a charity model of how we view disability. Charity is like, oh, these poor folks, we have to raise money for them. Come together, everybody, and let's raise money for them. That's devaluing them, right? In my opinion. And then there's the medical model that focuses on, these folks are broken, we need to fix them. Right? And then so if we can move towards the social model, and the social model, our society is broken. And we need to change our society and how we view folks with disabilities. So I get it, and I understand why someone would see, if we for, someone's lifetime has always identified folks with disabilities, they have a special school they go to. They have their own jobs, their own staff, their own homes. They're really not members of our community, and we need to change that, right? We need to ensure that they are welcoming, valued, participating members of our community. So the structure isn't fully set up for that, and we need to work on changing that.
100%.
Yeah.
So why this? Why is this your passion?
This is a good question. I've been feeling a lot lately. Now I'm into year 5 of running Merge, and a colleague of mine from New England Village asked me not too long ago, Lisa, do you wake up and do you have those days where you're like, oh, I just don't want to do this anymore? And I thought about it, and the answer was not one day.
Oh, what a great answer.
Not one day. I love my work, every aspect. I have not had a moment of regret or feeling like, oh, I'm tired of this. I actually get charged up. Every day is a new day, right? And it's just, I think this is my purpose. I have this really unique background, right? Working with folks with disabilities, and recreation around specifically for them. So I had that recreation, the importance of that, because recreation is a space where everybody can participate, and they can participate alongside peers who also like, a sewing class, right? Or music, or, we're going to do yoga together, right? And that's just beautiful. So it's just my purpose, I think. It's just my purpose. A funny story. When I was at the Y, and I felt like I knew I wanted to go on. I needed to move on. And I was starting to feel like I want to do this more broadly. And I know this is a little silly, but I was at my friend's house, and she called. She had a psychic come. And the psychic said, you were thinking of doing something, a big move in your career. And I had it. It had been going around in my mind. I just didn't know what it would look like. And she had said, my father passed in 1992, but she said, your father is telling you you need to do this.
Wow.
And I've historically have always, my father always comes up, he's a little pushy, he always comes up in psychics. When I talk to psychics, it's just something I enjoy doing. And I literally went home and I asked my husband, can I get on your insurance? And he checked and he said yes. And I went and gave my notice the next day. I was like, yep, this is what I was meant to do. And there was a warning with it. It is going to be difficult. You're going to get started. You're going to hit a lot of, roadblocks, a lot of challenges, but you're going to get through it. But whatever, it was confirmation for me that I'm meant to do this. And it was the best day of my life, right? Yep, this is what I'm doing, and it's been straight ahead since. Of course, COVID was a little bit of a hard hit, right. But I made it through,
yeah,
and even stronger. So that was pretty amazing.
What a great story! I love that.
Why'd you start doing this? My father told me, and then they're like, "Isn't your father dead?" Yes, he told me that this is my path.
So, what's some advice you have for someone with intellectual disability or physical disability who feels kind of isolated, who feels like they don't really belong yet? How do they get integrated into the community?
Yeah. That's the hardest.
Right.
That's the hardest part of my job, the sadness that I feel when either a family member calls me or an individual, or they share that, I'm lonely, I'm at home, or I want my child to have a friend. And so my advice is always start with that, go back to that self-advocacy piece, right? That exploratory, person-centered planning. Make sure we know, what does this person want to do? And there's actually a procedure that you can go through. It's a person-centered planning session, right? That you have someone come in and friends, family, community members who support this individual are all together to explore with this individual as a center. What are their passions? What do they love? What is the direction of their life, right? And it's a really powerful piece. I've been involved in it a couple times. Now you know what this person wants. There isn't assumptions, because sometimes we don't even ask an individual, right? Or we don't do that exploring. So once you find out what they love or would like to do, next is finding the right place to meet other people who also like to do that, right? So, and I think it's very important to understand, this is something that I teach in my trainings, that there are different models of how we participate. Briefly spoke about it. There's a specialized group. Okay, autism swim, just for folks with autism, or maybe wheelchair basketball that is created and designed for individuals who use a wheelchair and would like to play basketball, right? So it's for particular groups. So there's specialized or adaptive, segregated. There's integrated, there's peer buddy or like a buddy model situation, and then there's full inclusion. So you have to identify, how, I'm always teaching we need to move toward full inclusion. There might be a need for support at an integrated or a specialized model, but it should always be just a stepping stone towards getting towards inclusion. So we have to help them to get to that space where they can participate in what they love, but then eventually participate side by side with peers without disabilities, right? Peers who also love that activity, and not always segregate or separate folks or create programs that are special needs programs that are just for folks with disabilities. We need to spend more efforts in taking our existing, right, groups, classes, activities, events, and making them more inclusive, right, because that's when somebody really belongs. So I think just, for the individual themselves, or if they're young and their family, or they are involved with a human service agency, for them to always be focusing on how do we help support this individual with their self-advocacy to want to be part of a book club, or start horseback riding lessons, or be part of a chorus, right? Yeah. So, and helping them to get there. So, but here, it's hard work. Right. It's hard, and there's a lot of, we have to pave a lot of roads, and there are a lot of places who are still resistant to inclusion, unfortunately, mostly because there's a misunderstanding, a misperception about, we can't do this. We need specialized people. We don't have the background. And my response is, I'll teach you how.
Right.
If I can teach a group of 16 to 18-year-old camp counselors how to be inclusive, I can teach you. Right? And there's not really... specialty isn't required, right? Think about it. If a person were to have a child and they had no background and they find out that their child has, let's say, Down syndrome, they learn how to do it, right? They figure it out, and maybe through the support of others or whatnot, but they figure it out, and we can figure it out too, and we work with that individual, and we work with their family or their support system to help figure out how can we help this existing group activity club to be, for this person to be successful in this setting.
Do we still have a long way to go?
Oh.
Or are we on our way anyway?
We are on our way.
Yeah.
And I can tell there's more and more movement toward inclusion in our rec settings. And what happens is if one town does it well, it gets very competitive, and another town is like, wait, well, they're having it, now we're losing a good amount of our, community members who live in this town are going over to this town because they are offering inclusive supports. And then it is growing. And then the good thing about it is growing. So I'm going to give an example. I work with a couple of YMCAs that have just been hitting it out of the ballpark for a long time, right? And when I'm starting with someone new and they're kind of like, I can't see us being able to do this. This is overwhelming. I connect them with a Y that's doing it very well to help guide or mentor them. I think that's important because sometimes it does feel overwhelming until they can understand and see success, or they can envision what's possible, and then they start to go, oh, this actually isn't that hard. We can work together and do this. Right, yeah.
And we can work together as a community.
We can. We have a long way to go, but every day, every conference I present at, every training I do, and I have a room full of people, it just feels so magical. I just had the opportunity to change everybody in this audience's view, and hopefully, even if a quarter of them went home and did something different, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. The impact of that is huge.
The work you're doing is incredible. Just
Thank you.
incredible. I wish we had a million Lisa Drennans.
I know. Sometimes so do I. Right? Yeah, the days can be, there's a lot going on.
Well,
right?
thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
To find out more about Lisa Drennan, visit mergeconsulting.org.
Hi friends, if you like this video by The Local Scene, share the love and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe.